ABC General Hospital Spoilers revealed that Wiley had never meant to become the keeper of a nightmare. But the moment his small hand pushed open the door to Drew's dimly lit room, he stepped into a truth far darker than anything a child should ever witness. Willow was standing over the bed, her expression sharp with focus, the needle glinting under the lamp as she injected another dose of the drug that kept Drew trapped inside his own body. Wiley froze, hidden behind the doorframe, unable to understand why Drew looked so still. Why Willow's hands trembled as she pushed the plunger down. Why the room suddenly felt colder than the hallway he'd wandered from. He had heard adults whisper about sickness and healing, but none of it matched the fear in Willow's movements. The urgency in the way she wiped Drew's arm before turning away, unaware that a pair of wide eyes had watched everything. For a child, silence was safety, but for Wiley, silence soon became unbearable. The images replayed in his mind, Willow leaning over Drew, the syringe, the stillness, and each time, the unease grew heavier, pressing against him until he could not hold it any longer. When Michael asked casual questions later about his visit, about whether he and Amelia had fun, Wiley's voice cracked as he admitted he had seen something strange. Something about Mommy giving Drew special medicine. At first, Michael brushed it off, assuming Willow had simply been providing care, but the tone in Wiley's voice, the way his eyes filled with confusion and fear, pierced him. As Wiley continued speaking, explaining how Drew didn't move, how Willow told him not to worry, when how she hurried him out of the room, the pieces began to lock into place like the bars of a cage snapping shut. Michael felt his stomach twist as a suspicion he had buried for weeks clawed its way to the surface, raw and undeniable. Willow had been acting strangely, overly protective, controlling, who saw Drew and when. And now his own son had unknowingly confirmed what he had been too blind or too unwilling to fully imagine. The horror of it settled slowly like poison seeping into his veins. Willow wasn't caring for Drew. She was controlling him, incapacitating him, ensuring he stayed silent and compliant. Michael felt a storm rising inside him, a violent clash between betrayal, rage, and a cold clarity that burned through him with terrifying precision. Wiley, trembling, finished his confession by saying he didn't want Drew to sleep forever. And those words shattered any remaining doubt. Something monstrous was happening in that house, and Willow was at the center of it. The realization struck Michael like a physical blow, forcing him to confront not just Willow's crime, but the depth of her deception. She had already escaped consequences once after the shooting, and now she had pushed even further into a realm that could not be excused or rationalized. As the truth unfurled in front of him, Michael felt his breath tighten, his pulse pound with violent purpose. Fear for Drew's life mixed dangerously with fury at Willow's betrayal, creating an obsession that quickly eclipsed everything else. This wasn't just about protecting his son anymore. It was about exposing a lie so twisted it threatened the entire Corinthos and Quartermain families. The crime unfolding in Willow's home was not an accident or a moment of weakness. It was a deliberate, calculated imprisonment of a man whose only crime had been getting in her way. And now, thanks to Wiley's innocent honesty, the facade had cracked wide open. Michael found himself spiraling into a new kind of darkness, one that sharpened his instincts and hardened his resolve. He began to replay every recent conversation with Willow, every hesitation, every strangely timed explanation, realizing how expertly she had manipulated the narrative. If she was willing to drug Drew into paralysis, what else was she capable of? Could she turn on Michael next? Would she try to reclaim custody of the children by force, by deception, even by violence? The possibilities twisted inside him, feeding the obsession that now owned him entirely. What frightened him most was not Willow's actions, but the fact that he hadn't seen them sooner. Now armed with the truth, Michael felt something shift, a dangerous certainty settling in his chest. He wouldn't approach this with gentleness or patience. He wouldn't confront her blindly. He would gather evidence, track her steps, uncover every lie she had built her world upon. And when the moment came, he would tear it all down with surgical precision. Willow had created the perfect illusion of motherhood and compassion, but beneath it was a venomous need for control, a hunger wrapped in righteousness. Michael would expose that darkness not simply to save Drew, but to reclaim the safety that Willow had stolen from their children. Wiley, unaware of the storm he had triggered, simply clung to Michael's sleeve and whispered that something felt wrong, and that soft tremor in his voice sealed Michael's fate. This had become personal in a way nothing else ever had. Willow's crime was no longer just a secret poisoning. It was an attack on the fragile trust within their family. Michael's need for justice hardened into an obsession, an unyielding determination that would stop at nothing until Willow fell. The shift was subtle but irreversible. Michael was no longer reacting to danger. He was becoming its equal. A man pushed this far doesn't simply seek answers. He seeks destruction. And as the truth sank deeper, Michael realized that saving Drew was only the beginning. Confronting Willow would unleash a disaster that no one in Port Charles was prepared for. But the path had already begun, and Michael, fueled by betrayal and a new unsettling fire in his chest, was ready to walk it without looking back. Michael could no longer shake the growing suspicion that something was terribly wrong inside Willow's home. Wiley's trembling confession replayed in his mind. Mommy gave Drew special medicine, a sentence so innocent on the maw. The surface yet lethal, once paired with the look on Drew's lifeless face, the last time Michael had seen him. That single detail was enough to fracture the narrative Willow had been desperately trying to maintain. Now for the first time Michael found himself wondering not just what Willow was giving Drew, but why she needed to keep it hidden. A new chilling possibility took root inside him. Perhaps Drew wasn't sick at all. Perhaps Willow had done something to ensure he stayed silent. The shock of the thought hit him with brutal force. For years, Michael had hated Drew with a depth that felt carved into bone, a hatred born of betrayal, manipulation, and the chaos Drew had brought to their family. Yet here he stood, horrified at the idea that Willow, his wife, the woman he once trusted, might be the reason Drew was trapped inside a body that could not move or speak. Hatred had boundaries, cruelty did not. And as much as he resented Drew, Michael could not ignore the primal truth: no one deserved to be drugged into paralysis. Not Drew, and certainly not Scout's father. The image of Scout standing beside a hospital bed, clueless but heartbroken, pierced Michael with a guilt he had not expected. If Willow truly was responsible, then she hadn't just hurt Drew, she had violated the fragile world every child depended on. Strangely, that realization awakened something dangerous inside him. If Willow had crossed this line, he could use it. He could finally sever her grip on their family, tear away her custody rights once and for all, expose her as the threat she had become. For months, she had escaped justice, first with the shooting, then with her carefully crafted lies. But this was different. Drugging a man until he resembled a corpse, staging a false medical crisis, holding him captive while the world believed she was his savior. These were crimes no court could ignore. And for the first time, Michael felt the balance of power shifting into his hands. The idea that he, of all people, might be the one to investigate and ultimately save Drew felt surreal, almost ironic. But fate in Port Charles had never cared about irony. If anything, it thrived in it. Michael found himself standing at the edge of a storm he hadn't intended to enter. But now he could feel it pulling him forward, demanding action. Each new thought sharpened his resolve until suspicion hardened into certainty. He would uncover the truth. He would expose Willow. And when the world saw what she had done, she would finally face the consequences she had evaded for far too long. What Michael didn't anticipate was the shift happening inside him, an obsession taking shape fueled by betrayal, righteous anger, and a dark hunger for justice. The more he imagined Willow standing over Drew with a syringe, the more he felt something inside him ignite. Not just anger, not just shock, but a personal vendetta forming its own heartbeat. He needed to know how far Willow had gone, how long she had been lying, how close she had come to letting Drew die. He needed answers, but more importantly, he needed control over the narrative, over the danger, over the family she had manipulated. When he finally confronted Willow, it wouldn't be with gentle questions or cautious doubt. It would be an explosion born from every deceit she had fed him. She would see the fury in his eyes before she ever heard the accusations in his voice. And she would know that he wasn't just coming for the truth, he was coming for everything she had left to lose. The war forming between Michael and Willow was no longer quiet, no longer hidden beneath the surface of polite smiles and co-parenting agreements. It was a violent collision of lies and revelations, a battle fueled by fear, desperation, and the slow unraveling of a marriage built on fractured foundations. As Michael prepared to pull Drew out of the nightmare he had been trapped in, he also prepared for the inevitable destruction that would follow. When the truth finally exploded into the open, when Drew was rescued, when Willow's crimes were, the moment Michael and Jason decide to work together, Port Charles shifts into a far more dangerous phase. Michael is no longer the man trying to clear his name. He is a man who has seen how easily the system can be, manipulated how quickly someone he trusted nearly destroyed him. Jason, on the other hand, understands this kind of darkness intimately. He recognizes patterns, pressure points, the invisible architecture behind carefully staged chaos. And when the evidence begins pointing toward a deeper architect behind Willow's unraveling, the truth lands like a bomb. The real power behind her actions may be Sidwell. At first, the idea feels almost impossible. Willow's ambition, her calculated manipulation, her willingness to eliminate Drew, those seemed like personal choices fueled by desperation. But as Michael and Jason start piecing together timelines, financial irregularities, suspicious communications, and subtle behavioral shifts, a new pattern emerges. Willow wasn't acting alone. She was being guided, nudged, shielded, perhaps even encouraged. And Sidwell's name keeps resurfacing in the margins of every suspicious turn. Jason senses something chilling beneath the surface. Sidwell doesn't move recklessly. He builds storms, quietly positioning others as the visible threats while he remains untouchable. If he was indeed the one pulling strings behind Willow's decisions, then the chaos was never accidental. It was strategic. Frame Michael. Destabilize Drew. Create political vacuum. Push Willow forward. Remove obstacles. It is a design so cold and methodical that even Jason feels a rare flicker of unease. Michael struggles with the realization. If Sidwell truly manipulated Willow, then her crimes were not just acts of ambition, they were part of something much larger. Something designed to fracture alliances and consolidate power. The deeper they dig, the more unstable the situation becomes. Because exposing Sidwell won't just clear the air, it will ignite retaliation. Sidwell does not lose quietly, and that is where everything begins to feel unhinged. The more Michael and Jason uncover, the clearer it becomes that this is no longer a simple legal battle or a personal vendetta. It is psychological warfare. Sidwell thrives on watching others collapse under pressure, pushing them toward decisions that seem irrational but are, in fact, predictable responses to carefully engineered fear. Willow's downward spiral may have been encouraged, amplified, even weaponized. And now with her arrested and exposed, Sidwell's next move becomes the real threat. Jason knows what comes next. When a mastermind loses one pawn, he sacrifices it and shifts the board. Michael feels it too, the sense that they are only seeing the outer edge of something far more dangerous. Sidwell is not scrambling. He is recalculating. And that is what makes the situation terrifying. Because if Sidwell truly orchestrated Willow's descent, then nothing in Port Charles is as random as it seems. Every betrayal, every arrest, every accusation could be part of a larger narrative he is crafting. And as Michael and Jason stand united, prepared to confront the truth, they both understand one thing: the deeper they go, the more insane the game becomes. And Sidwell is still smiling somewhere in the shadows,